Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Jain Irrigation Training Series. I'm Richard Restuccia, Vice President of Water Management Solutions for Jain Irrigation, and today we're going to talk about 3 keys to irrigation business success. And why this is so important and why we chose this as a subject is because right now, for those of us who are experiencing this, and I think all of us are, right? This is probably the most unstable, or what did I say? The world for us right now seems to be a little out of balance when it comes to doing business. COVID has put a big strain on supply chain. It's been interesting to see the demands that we're having for particular products and goods and services. And all that has impacted us business-wise in a way that I've never seen in all my years in business. And so we want to talk about this and kind of figure out what dealers, distributors, contractors, growers can do in a time where we see resin prices up 100% since last April. We're seeing, I worry about that. Then I find out, oh man, Amazon's bought every cardboard box in the world. We can't get cardboard. So this makes it tough to get our customers' products. And then I go to the gas station and gas is hitting about $4 a gallon. And I think nobody's, people aren't traveling for work as much as they did. Why is this price of gas up so high? And so these are all the things every one of us is dealing with right now. And I'm really happy that we've got Michael Pippen with us today. Michael Pippen's he's a business, Michael deals with business development for Jain Irrigation. And the thing I really like about this conversation is Michael's been a grower. He's lived his life in agriculture. He's worked for a dealer. He knows that side of the business as well. And now he's worked for Jain now for many years. We're so lucky to have him on our team. And I find that when I need somebody who's got kind of this 360 view of what's happening, Michael seems to have that view. So we're really lucky to have Michael taking us on this trip today. And Michael, welcome. And thanks for joining us. And man, what are you seeing out there these days?
Richard, as always, I appreciate the introduction. When we talked earlier in the week, what are your dealers seeing? Like, what are you hearing? And the message is quite different than we've heard in the past. And I've been in the irrigation industry and trying to do sales for almost 20 years now, to some degree, at least 15. And this is a different conversation that I've ever had with any kind of customers of mine. We talk a lot about being good stewards of our time. We potentially are getting even, very inundated with content and with requests for time. We're asking for time today, and people trying to figure out how to do that, right? Where, how to communicate with customers, how to communicate with people, vendors and things like that, struggling with doing that effectively and efficiently. I hear a lot of challenges in the supply chain. But different kinds of challenges that we've had in the past, some that don't have great solutions, not a whole lot of good options out there. So sometimes you might be choosing from the best of a couple of less than ideal options. Shipping and logistical issues that are, I think we're always, I've always worked in a business where we had to move some pretty big stuff around, not like small little packages, pallets and truckloads and things like that. So freight has always been a concern, but it really kind of stayed in the cost concern. Where can I get the best deal, and how much does it cost 3 days versus 5 days versus 7 days? And now we're saying, how much does it cost, but is it even available? Can I even, is there a dollar amount that I can afford to spend to move this? And, not being able to access central parts of the U.S. or trying to move stuff coast to coast like we do in this industry quite a bit. And I think the final thing that we're trying to grapple with that I hear, I'd say more in the last, let's call it month or 8 weeks, is rapid price increases, not just price increases. We're kind of all used to having to spring price increase, right? It's kind of the new year rolls around and everybody kind of assesses their cost and things like that. Like that's not uncommon in any industry, I don't believe, but having this exponential just, spike that seems to be out of our control. And maybe it always has been. It just seems like now it's just, how do we mitigate that, and what can we do to reduce the effects on our business, right? And I think those are the things that we're talking about. So quite different conversations than I think I've had with any customers in the past.
Yeah, and you would agree that this is what your customers want to talk about today, right? A few months ago, they wanted to talk about irrigation, but today they want to talk about not how to install things or how something works. They want to talk about how to get stuff, right?
Right. They have leaned on us, as I say us. I think not just Jain, but maybe others manufacturers in our industry where, for insight. I won't say they're not plugging us for information, but say, how are you handling it? What are you doing? Have you found anything that works? Right? Do you have? I've asked customers that. I was like, do you have a freight truck? Do you have an extra truck laying around? You want to haul some stuff for us? And those are kind of conversations that are interesting to have, right? They're not. I don't know that any of us are experts in these kind of challenges. That's not where we came up in the industry, but that is what we're being asked of our customers, and so therefore it is, kind of our role and responsibility to do that, because if that's what they're needing the support on, that's what we need to focus and try to help them figure out and solve that problem.
Yeah, well, I do hope they are plugging you for some information, because that's part of their job, right? So,
right.
So let's talk about dealers and distributors first, okay?
Yep.
This raw material costs increasing, prices changing so rapidly. In the old days, we might go a year and a half, 2 years without really seeing any significant price increases. Today, I know, aluminum, lumber, resin, all these products are skyrocketing, right? And we're seeing people saying the price is this as of tomorrow. And the price is this is sometimes a double-digit increase. So if you're a dealer, if you're a distributor, how do you deal with these material costs going up so rapidly?
This would fall in that category of there's probably not one great answer, right? It's probably trying to find multiple solutions. Multiple solutions, and none of them might be exactly what you want to hear. But from a costing position, trying to mitigate these price increases, I think there's a couple of ways that you can unpack that. And these are some of these experiences that we've tried to implement with varying degrees of success. But I would always kind of look at what are you purchasing right now? What is the demand that you need absolutely at this time? Can we stretch out this demand over a period of time and hopefully limit this price increase, right? If you pull demand down, it should help mitigate some of these costs. So that could look like a lot of different things. For us, I think, if I put my designer hat, maybe more of the distributor, as I go, okay, what do I have in the warehouse? And, what works, or what does Jain have in their warehouse? And is it the most ideal product? Maybe not the one I'd pick out of the catalog, but the availability. Can I use it over here? Therefore, reserving those raw materials, in this case, maybe resin, for this project over here where I have a much tighter constraint on the product application. I think that's reasonable. There's always a balance point where you're not going to take a product and put it in the wrong application. But, you might be taking, let's say you're doing a dripper that's a 0.42 versus a 0.53 gallon an hour, right? Very little. And it might work fine. It's just, you've used the 0.5 in the past and kind of considerations. But, maybe that 4.2, maybe you can make it work, right? And so you can't get to, 6 weeks from now and say, what do those prices look like? We're hoping they'll relax. They might not, right? But maybe that's a way to kind of mitigate those input costs. Trying to figure out places that you can use existing inventory, I think is something we focused on here at Jain. I think we also could look at the timing of things, right, and say maybe they order 500 of some item. and you say, okay, well, right now, here's our cost. Do you really need 500? Well, I really need 200 now, but and 300 later, but I ordered 500 to get free freight, or I've ordered 500 because that was the pallet quantity. And so, I think if you're servicing that customer, you would say, you look at that kind of with a, some reasonable glasses on and say, okay, well, let's hold that 300 you don't need till later. We'll still do that policy or hit that target or whatever you're trying to do. Let's work through that. It might cost me a little bit more. It might cost you a little bit of time, me a little bit of money, but being able to split that demand up, I think that's a tool that if enough people do it and stretch this demand out, then potentially that could really help. And especially with raw material input, that takes some time to roll through. Anything we don't have to produce exactly this minute, but maybe can move on. I think that's a good strategy. It's not an ideal strategy, but it can help.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I wanted to touch on that you said. But first, I just want to remind everybody, we've got the Q&A open and the chat. If you got some questions or some comments or some experiences you want to share, put them in there and I'll relate those to Michael during the conversation. So one thing you said, Michael, really was about this communication and being a good partner is really what you're saying. And it's so interesting, right? Because we always say it's easy to be a good partner when times are good. And when times get a little rocky, this is when you really test the partnerships and who is good and who's a good partner. So we're all experiencing that right now. And so that was my comment. Then my question is, you said, what do you have available? Is that a fair question? Can a customer ask you, what do you have? And is this shareable?
Yes and yes. So communication, I think, is probably what is most important in a partnership of any kind, whatever kind of partnership. And that is often something that we struggle with. I struggle with. And there's a lot of unpacking there. We're not going to go all the way into the different types of communication, but one thing that I saw last week that I thought was really interesting when it talked about communication is a kind of this effectiveness of remote learning. Now, I know we're not always talking about remote learning here, but this would kind of fall in this, this webinar might fall in this category of remote learning. But let's just say you're connecting with your dealer or your customer, your end user remotely, basically exclusively now, right, for the last year. And maybe you're finding out that that's financially pleasing to meet, to do more things remotely. This study came out that really kind of engaged their effectiveness of remote learning or remote communication with school teaching, right? And these are trained, educated, certified talkers, right? Teachers, right? Not irrigation guys, people that have all the skill sets that are needed to do this. With 1 being the least effective and 10 being the most effective, you can see the U.S. came in at a miserable 3.5 on the effectiveness scale. And you won't go into what all they did to make these calculations, but let's just say that one comment from the report was that this 3.5 came in slightly above just giving a student a book and not saying anything. And so what that tells us, I think, and how it translates into the irrigation industry is, so we're trying to do a lot of this. So we don't have the luxury of being in contact. Let's just say you're face-to-face contact where we may be more comfortable, where you can pick up on cues. Maybe you don't have quite as much time constraint, which I think is a strange thing, but you go visit a customer, you might spend an hour or so there. I don't get a whole lot of hours of webinars or phone calls that I get with growers or end users. So, trying to be super effective in that communication and understanding, building that relationship so they can talk back to you and tell you what you need to hear to be able to do your job better and service them better. I think we've gotten better. We work at it. I think awareness is the first thing to get better at, right? To understand that we might not be very good at this. I go back, we've done a couple of these webinars. I go back and listen to them. It's kind of painful sometimes, right? Yeah. But we want to get better at this. This I think translates into your day-to-day business. Yeah. If this seems to be a path that we want to get better at, if it seems like this is a change that we've learned and trying to adapt instead of just using it as a patch to get through where I can go see people again, physically, let's turn it into a tool. And I think it's totally appropriate to ask somebody, here's what I need, here's what I'm looking for, what do you have? And it may be just a simple, you might get an upgrade, right? I mean, it doesn't mean you get a downgrade. You might get a better 2x4. They might be out of the cheap pine studs, but they've got this, pressure treat or whatever, and this, I'll give it to you at the same price because I got some and I know this will help. And so, it doesn't always mean you're taking a downgrade when you're finding something off the shelf. Maybe you get, we have many different types of emitters, and some are, maybe a little bit better than you need, but that's the one I have and that's the one I can supply. And so let's do that one, right? And I think that's what we're talking about, is not taking a product that doesn't need to be in the application and forcing it in somewhere. It's looking at the options. What can you do? But you have to be really confident in your, and comfortable is probably a better way to say, comfortable with your relationship from somebody you're buying stuff from, to say, what do you need me to buy from you? That's not something we normally hear. But I'd encourage it. I think that's a healthy form of communication.
Yeah, so this is a grim scenario, right, on the effectiveness of remote learning, since we're trying to remote teach right now.
Sure.
And look, so as we learned from Charles Fishman, and if you haven't seen the Charles Fishman interview, it's in our training series. He did a great job, and he said, what's the problem? We need 3 solutions for it. So what are some of the ways, right? And you mentioned we work at this, right? We evaluate, we look at everything we're doing, we try to get better, we talk about it a lot. What are some other things people can do to increase their ability to provide good remote learning?
I think for us, or me, and maybe you as well, Richard, we talk about being very intentional. Where maybe you're putting more thought on the front end of why you're reaching out to somebody, or why you're asking them to spend time that they're probably getting asked by somebody else. And these aren't new concepts, right? I just feel like historically we've had this luxury of kind of engaging somebody in a face-to-face conversation where you can kind of ease in to what you're really talking about, right? You're there, you've got kind of this personal back and forth, where in this digital platform, it doesn't seem to be consumed that way. I don't consume my information that way in a digital platform. I go and I grab this and I grab this and I grab this, and these are 20 minutes and these are 30 and that's 40, and I fit that in my schedule. And so I think intentionality of what you're trying to communicate, right? We talk about the weather before we hit the record button, right? So, because when we hit that record button, we want content and we want it specific so that people can pick from this one and this one. I want to not get offended if not everybody goes and picks this from me. I believe that I know what I do when I try to learn, whether this is a sales pitch or a product information. I mean, you can go anywhere in this sales process, but like if I find somebody to bring value, I'll listen to a lot of things they talk about more to them than necessarily the topic. Now, the topic, it can't be way off base, right? But let's just say if you're creating content or you've reached out to this end user and been able to provide some value in the past, obviously he's going to be more apt, or she's going to be more apt to come back to you for future content. Maybe not this one, maybe the timing doesn't work or whatever. So I think intentionality is a big thing. And I think most of that just comes in on preparing on the front end. Why am I calling this person? Why am I reaching out to them? Why am I asking them to get on this webinar? And what could be their value? My value as a salesperson is they buy something from me, right? And hopefully build a relationship that we can, be friends and all that kind of good stuff, right? But I mean, what are they getting out of it? And I think that's hugely important.
Yeah, those are really good points. And, if you think about it, a year ago when we first started down this road of our Wednesday, Friday webinars, we were somewhat winging it, right? I mean, we thought
a little bit.
I literally thought we might be doing this a couple weeks. I mean, that was in my mind. Well, we'll do it for a couple weeks and then we'll be okay. So then, right, we do a lot more preparation today than we did a year ago. And I think people benefit from that. So I kind of want to segue off now the remote learning and talk about availability, right? A lot of times our dealers, distributors are calling suppliers and stuff's just not available today. What's happening? What's causing this, and what can they do about it?
A lot of things, a lot of moving parts that I won't pretend to even understand all the way, but I can tell you that that we as an industry, irrigation industry, work in this global supply chain, which has a tremendous amount of benefits and also a tremendous amount of challenges. I would suggest, I put up here on the slide kind of a very rudimentary supply chain kind of flow chart, right? Where you're on the beginning, you're kind of source and kind of buy these products, and then it gets into kind of distribution of getting that and then out into the market. And I think, at least for me, this supply chain has always been somewhat segmented. And me, I'm living over here kind of in this distribution, getting it out into the market segment. Now, I know the people over here in this source and procurement, and they ask me questions and I ask them questions and back and forth, and we communicate, and we actually, do a pretty good job, I think, because we've done this for a while. We have experienced people within our organization that kind of know how to communicate and what expectations are and all those big things. But in the last year, I believe the effectiveness of how you're supplying these things is understanding, not just going and grabbing the information over here from your supply chain manager or him asking you how much do you need, but understanding the challenges that move through that and trying to help your supply chain manager anticipate that. I think of situations where there's, a demand for a specific product that's outside of maybe just your territory or maybe outside of your country. And all of a sudden, when it never occurred to you that this product could potentially be a bottleneck of your sales and your support of your end users, but somebody somewhere else halfway across the world really likes those things as well. And all of a sudden you had no understanding of that. And so we weren't, maybe we weren't prepared for it. Maybe that was down your radar of things that you were focusing on. So I think understanding that supply chain, don't make assumptions, man. That's what's gotten me in trouble, Richard. If you want to just be personal, making assumptions that, they'll get here, right? It's fine. Like I've never had a problem with that before. I mean, you can find a truck to wherever, right? They always find a truck, and a week later, we ain't got a truck, right? And so, don't make those assumptions. And I think that what I believe, people that have most successfully navigated these constraints in supply chain, most of us don't have the wherewithal or the resources to just change it, right? To say, give me more of this. That's probably not going to work, right? But the people that have really navigated this well, I do believe have been able to communicate back and forth on the supply chain. They've not made these assumptions, and they've also been able to kind of, I guess what I'm kind of struggling for the word, what I want to say here. But as this supply chain was getting constrained, they recognized there was not a whole lot of ways to fix it immediately. Like you couldn't just go in and say, maybe I made this mistake in saying how many I need. Let me go get an extra pallet. That pallet may cost 4 times what it did a year ago. And so we don't have as many get out of jail free cards. And so the people that have done it successfully have been able to avoid those very costly fixers, if you will, right? Patches that we had access to maybe a year ago, but right now cost a lot of money or just simply not available, right? And maybe I said that clear enough, but I really think we just have lost some of those luxury items that might have got us out of trouble from not planning properly. And now they're either really expensive enough that you get a phone call from somebody and say, why are you spending all this money? Or in a worst case scenario, just not even available, not even an option to move that. So those are the people that have been most successful in it.
Yeah. So Michael, are your conversations with your customers, and I'm mainly speaking to dealers right now, are your conversations about forecasting different or the same than they were a year ago?
Different, and I think trending in a better direction. I believe is a tendency, and we as a manufacturer, we buy stuff too, right? We have vendors as well, and distributors, dealers, and all the way through, and I've worked with the distribution. But I think we have the tendency, or have had the tendency, you go to the person you're buying, and you're pulling information from them. Where in reality, that probably is the most of the information, but what is much more helpful is that transparent back, giving information back to somebody that you're buying from, which is a little vulnerable, right? Makes you a little exposed, kind of out there in the breeze a little bit. There's a lot of trust that comes into that. You have to build those types of relationships. You have to use that information appropriately. You probably don't get a whole lot of chances as if someone's buying from you to use that information inappropriately, whether you do it on purpose or not, right? You just don't get a whole lot of chances there. But I definitely have seen this kind of trend to where the best relationships, let's just say the best, right? The handful of people that I know the best, that know me the best, that, kind of built these relationships over time, where they say, let's go back to the example that they've got 500 on order and I don't have 500, right? I've got 250 and he's got 500 and somebody over here has got some. We got 4 or 5 people that have these open orders or whatever. But the guys that I have the best relationship with could call me and say, hey, I know I've got 500 on order. I know you don't have 500. Do you have 150? Do you have 150 that you can get me? And that'll get me out of this bind, right? And being able to give me that information and not say I have to have 500, I've got 150 will help me out. And if all the people that you're dealing with that product are comfortable enough to give you that kind of information, then maybe in the ideal world, you could help them all, right? You could take that 500 and split it up and be able to make, no one's going to be, these aren't ideal solutions, right? These are not, like we said before, this is not the perfect, but we're not in the perfect times either. Can we, if we had those relationships across all product lines, across all relationships, all customer bases, then it allow us more opportunities to solve those problems, right? I'm not suggesting take from one person and give it to the other. What I'm suggesting is if we have those more transparent relationships where they can tell you exact needs, then I think there's more opportunities to be successful. And trying to think through this, there's a lot of sales process, diagrams out there, and one of them is kind of this 7 steps to selling. I've seen it presented a lot of different ways, but the way I've tried to describe this today is, not a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way from, prospecting and finding the sale and all the way up to where you sell it and follow up. But where you've got this sales process is kind of like this hub in the center to where information can go from one to the other place. And maybe it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, but maybe it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, back to 3, 4, 3, 4, 3, 7, 3, where you're going back, we're in a dynamic to where you can call a customer, explain things that have happened. This is what I expected. This is what really happened. What can we do to fix it? Making adjustments on the fly, right? Those are things that make it successful. They're not going to be ideal. Not everybody's going to be happy, but I will say that I think there are, and the tone that I receive from customers this year has been remarkable, really, of how, I don't know if lenient's the right word, understanding might be the right word, but the willingness to work through this as an organization. I can tell the people that I've been a good steward of that information and built those relationships, and I can tell the ones where I haven't, and I've struggled supporting them as well as some others, and that's something I've learned and something I'm going to work on for sure.
Yeah, it's so true. I had a customer a few years ago, and it was early in our customer relationship, but he came to me one day and he said, if you guys keep on doing X the way you're doing it, I don't think you'll be able to afford me as a customer a year from now. And he was just pointing out a place where we were experiencing some high costs, and he was worried about it from the sense of, man, I've got a good supplier here. I like you guys. I want to stay with you guys. I love your products, but you need to be more profitable with it. How can we change this? And so that was, that was a big, sigh of relief from me. in that relationship, but boy, did it change things for us going forward. And talk about lifting up the trust factor with them. And I really saw that we were going to be a team working together once they showed that. And I, again, this transparency is so important. It's something we really talk a lot about at Jain. It's something that Eric Olson, the president, always talks about, is having this transparency. And boy, I notice it really does make a difference.
Totally agree. I've made literally no embellishment. I've made 2 calls this week to people that we had these relationships and said, look, this is not going to happen the way that we thought it was going to happen. Here's a couple of options. What do you think? And in both cases, I would say those customers bailed me out a little bit, right? One of them said, don't worry about it, we're good. And the other one said, take your time to produce it, basically, is what he said. And the other one said, well, just send me what you got. That'll get us down the road a little bit, and then we'll talk next week, right? So that they both took different solutions. We laid out the best ones on there, but we've been working on those, right? And so I think that goes back to what are one of the keys? And I think, man, that really, I've got a bunch of customers, end users, right? I need that with all of them. And that takes time. It takes effort. It takes intentionality, communicating properly, and being a very good steward of not just their time, but that information that they give you.
Yeah. Early in my career, I used to think, I had to keep all my customers happy. I had to be popular with my customers. And so in order to do that, I couldn't provide any bad news. Right. Otherwise they might hate me. Right.
Right.
So that's changed though, right? I mean, how do we, right, keep our customers happy, really?
No, you're not going to keep everybody happy. I'm not happy all the time. Right. I'm not happy with people in our organization. I'm not happy with myself sometimes. Right. It happens. But I think that, I believe that recognizing when you're trying to meet a goal and doing the things that are within reason to hit those targets, I believe that most of the people that we work with are going to understand that. I understand that, right? I understand that people have limitations for whatever it is. It could be resources, it could be time. They got other people calling on them too, right? And we see that internally. I think that, being quick with your response is also very critical. And that's probably a different webinar topic, but something that just popped in my mind. Even a response that says, give me an hour, I appreciate. Hey, I hear you. I can't do it right now. Give me some time to think through this and figure it out. I think that's appropriate. I appreciate that when I'm dealing with vendors or suppliers or production or whatever, saying, yeah, I get you. This is not working. I didn't do what I was supposed to do, but give me an hour, give me a half a day. Sometimes these are complicated solutions. And so it takes time to do that. And then also, like, we go back to point number one, if you want, key number one is thinking about how to present it in a clear and well thought out manner. And hopefully you have dialogue enough to take some feedback and tweak those plans to fit what the customer wants. And I think that's the best way you can do it. There's going to be some bad, we're going to be unhappy with each other at some point in time, but trying to mitigate that to just understanding and doing the best with what we have to work with in a constrained environment is the best practice.
Yeah, I think that's so true, Michael. And you can see, right, when you have a tough call to make and you've talked to somebody else about that tough call, and you go back to them and their first question is, oh my God, how did it go? And the thing is, it went fine. There was no drama. I didn't do it in a voice. I just very, systematically presented what I had to present and some alternatives, choices and ways to move forward. And it went just fine. And so I think people think in general that call is going to be much worse than it actually is. And it's not. Because people are they don't want surprises, but if you're handling it properly, then they're going to be okay.
Yeah, one phrase, last catchphrase I'll share today, but I thought about it multiple times putting this together this week. If you've seen the Jim Valvano, anything about him, and winning the national championship with a very unlikely, very challenging, right? It's very challenging circumstances to them win that national championship that year. And if you maybe make not too big of a step into our current challenging environment, his message was survive and advance, right? It's not always going to be pretty. It's definitely going to be difficult. But make the right decisions at the right time. Do your best to overcome these challenges, some that are your fault, some of them that are way outside your influence, but survive and advance, right? And I think that was that kept on popping into my week. We want to make the best solutions that we can, do the best job, learn something along the way that we can maybe apply when things aren't so challenging, and survive and advance and maintain those relationships the best you can.
Yeah. So we've got time here, Michael, for one last question from one of our viewers, and they're talking about when I'm a contractor and I'm having challenges delivering stuff on time to my customers because of things that are out of my control. I have a great opportunity to grow my business, but I can't get stuff, and so as a result, the demand for my business is there, but my business is actually shrinking because I can't get materials. So I'm frustrated. My customers want stuff. How do I deal with this? What can I do?
So there probably is, the word that comes to my mind is priorities. I did not have a great understanding of this in distribution. I'm learning it more in manufacturing, where there's always going to be a limitation of what you can do. I kind of had this false sense at some point to where the limiting factor was me, and I could go get anything I wanted and I could go do anything I wanted if I was the constraint part. And that can be true, but I think in a lot of ways, we have a limited amount of inputs we can bring into our business, and we definitely have a limited amount of outputs. And so you have to prioritize those. If you're in a business growth mode in the current environment, it's going to be challenging. You can be the best drip irrigation manufacturer in the world, bar none. You can almost be the only drip manufacturer in the world right now and try to grow your business. It's going to be very, very challenging. So if you want to try to capitalize on that right now, where there is a lot of demand, then I think you really have to look at priorities. You have to look at if you're a contractor, maybe you've been trying to grow your business and you've had to travel 2 hours out to a different piece of property, right? And now you could say, those guys, you may have to drop some of those customers that aren't as profitable to you, or maybe doesn't fit in your area of expertise. Maybe you don't do a whole lot of landscape lighting, but you've got a couple of lighting contracts. You might take those customers and say, look, I'm really an irrigation guy. These guys over here are really good at lighting. Maybe you should try to reach out to them, right? And I think you have to focus your business, and it's not easy. I mean, I'm a salesman. I won't pick up the phone and somebody says, I want some drip tape, and I've had to say no. And I think that recognizing your core business of who you are, what you're trying to do, being loyal to people that have done business with you in the past, I think is super important right now, right? Not that you can't get new customers, but man, a guy's been doing business with you for 20 years. You need to try to protect, in my opinion, you need to try to protect his business as much as you can before you go try to get more. I think that most people would agree with that. And so I think that's it. But I mean, really, and I think that, maybe profitability is not the number one there may be strategic reasons that you want to grow your business, but you have this finite thing that we recognize now that, maybe you haven't in the past. It's always been there, but now it's maybe more evident that you have a finite input. So being very strategic, from profitability to core competencies to maybe strategic things that you want to do. You might want to go get that contract just because that person lives in that neighborhood and you've been trying to get in there for 5 years. And so, there's things, I think you just have to prioritize it.
Yeah, I think those are great suggestions and great ideas. And one I'd add to it, when I was in the contracting business, one thing that I noticed is we could say, here's a price for you if you want it in the next 2 weeks. And if you can wait a month or two, here's your price. And oftentimes they were elated to know that we were actually scheduling our jobs. And that was, they like to see that that was part of the process. And two, that they could have a little bit of a discount if they waited a little while. And oftentimes, they were waiting, but happy to be waiting because they were saving a little bit of money. And so I felt like, gee, we're making this customer happy, and better hit that time frame of the schedule. But you're making them happy, and that worked out really well.
Yeah, letting them choose, right? When you can, give them the best options you have. They might they might want it tomorrow, and that may not be an option. But give them I think that's great, Richard. Give them a 2-week, a 4-week, and a 6-month option, right? And say, let them pick from those. Giving them the best options you have might not be ideal, but rarely anything is. So, give them some options, whatever that looks like is probably really good advice.
Yeah. So, Michael, any final tips you want to pass to anybody out there dealing in this unstable environment right now?
Be patient. We talk about it a lot within our group. Keeping a cool head. I will say that I have just, I don't know that I've been overly surprised is the way I think that the generosity that I've been treated as a salesperson in the last 6 months, I've appreciated, and I've tried to take that and pass it along where I can on our supply chain side. I think that would be the one takeaway that, at the very end is to be patient and try to work through a solution the best we can, and work with people that are trying to work together with you. Right. And that's, so being patient, I think is a strong virtue in these times.
Yeah, so you had some great ideas for us today, Michael. I really appreciate it. Great advice. I love the kind of just the idea generating that you did for everybody. If somebody wants to call you and talk about this some more, is that okay?
Anytime. Yes, sir. I got my email and my phone number on there. And so anybody wants to reach out, I'll send you I can send you some of the resources that I got some of the stuff from, and where I read up, and I'll be happy to share that with you.
That's great, Michael. Thanks so much. Thanks for being our guest. I look forward to seeing you next month as a guest again. I want to say thank you to all our viewers. We really appreciate the time you take to spend this time with us. Please remember, you can see all our almost 100 trainings now on the JainsUSA.com website under trainings. We're also on YouTube. And if you enjoy the trainings on video, boy, please subscribe. And then we're also on Google, Apple, and Spotify podcasts. So if you want to just listen to us when you're driving around in your truck from job to job, that's great too. Thank you, everybody. I hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you back here next week. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Richard.